All right, everybody, you have just tuned in to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by 26shirts.com/Pittsburgh. And we have an absolute bundle of things to discuss tonight because it has been one unusually busy week in the Steel City. It's always busy during the football season, but with everything that went on Sunday and the loss to Seattle, there are just all kinds of things, and we're going to do our best to get through it. Joining me tonight are Ian and Ben. And Ian, how are things going for you other than the fact that the Steelers are 0-2?
Well, other than the fact that they're 0-2, pretty good. Can't really complain too much. But, it's I think as unfortunate as it is to lose Ben Roethlisberger for the season, I think his injury did make it a little easier to swallow being 0-2. Just the fact that we had to play a whole half of football with our backup quarterback, it's kind of like, okay, have to temper my expectations a little bit. I mean, I'm obviously not happy that we're 0-2, but the expectations go down a little.
Yeah, totally fair point. Totally fair point. And Ben, you were there in Pittsburgh to witness the carnage. What was your takeaway from Sunday and moving forward to today?
Well, from Sunday, it was that sucked. Moving forward, it obviously you get away from it and you get a little more perspective because the emotions dissipate from the moment. But yeah, I really expected them to win. And I looked at that game. The defense gave the offense the ball twice in close and basically gave them 14 points. They spotted them 14 points. And, the offense was only able to score another 12 on their own. And they were not good. Dante Moncrief, he may be the worst acquisition since Josh Scobie. He was absolutely horrible again. I just didn't see all those guys on the same page. And, there were some things that Rudy did there that were encouraging. And there were some things the defense did that were really, really discouraging. The same crap over and over again with simple route concepts being missed because of miscommunication. It's become a recurring theme. And, for somebody like me who has consistently defended Mike Tomlin, I'm in a very, very difficult position. And it's very hard to keep doing that. Mike should have fired his defensive coordinator. I know we've talked about this before, but at this point, I'm getting ready to go ahead and join the chorus of let's go ahead and fire Keith Butler midseason and do the unprecedented in Pittsburgh and make a switch. You've got Terrell Austin there; he's got experience. Make him the DC today.
Yeah. It's very interesting because the Steelers also did something this week that they hadn't done in many, many, many decades, and so it's obvious that the Steelers under Art Rooney too are operating and have operated differently than they did under Art Rooney and that they did under Dan. Now that doesn't mean that they're going to go ahead and fire Keith Butler next week or anything like that or halfway through, but it does give me a glimmer of hope that they may get to that point because as you said, and I know Ian's going to jump in on this too, it is the same things over and over and over. And I know it's cliche to just keep talking about, definition of insanity, blah, 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 but that's where I'm at. And that's where I felt like I was at after week one. I've been a longtime supporter of Tomlin, but I'm getting to the point too where I just can't keep seeing the same things over and over again. Ian, where are you on because you've been a Tomlin supporter too. I mean, are you starting to fracture a little bit there?
I think, I mean, generally as a whole, I think head coaches are mostly responsible for, setting the tone, making in-game decisions, which Tomlin has struggled with. I once called him the best Monday through Saturday coach in the league, or Tuesday through Saturday, really, if you have a Monday night game. But, he talks a good game during the week, but he doesn't always deliver during the game on Sundays. That's always something he struggled with clock management, with in-game adjustments, things like that. That being said, while he is in charge of setting his staff, deciding his coordinators, the X's and O's of the scheme of the defense and the offense really do fall more on the coordinators than on Tomlin himself. We have heard stories and reports about how Tomlin has taken more of a control, especially in the defense. So some of the fault may fall on him. They are still doing the same things schematically that they've done that don't work repeatedly. And you are right with sort of the definition of insanity. That being said, I'll try not to mention this name anymore on this podcast, but with every continual story that comes out about Antonio Brown, it does make me respect Tomlin's ability to keep everything under wraps in Pittsburgh a little bit better for just as long as he did, because it's not that this guy got this crazy all of a sudden. Like, he was doing crap all along, and the Steelers did a fantastic job of just keeping it in house and keeping it under wraps and getting him out there to play and produce on Sunday. So whatever they did, there's some respect there that they were able to get as much production out of that player for as long as they did. So, I think you have to look at it as a whole. One thing that I was thinking about immediately after the game last week was whether or not Ben going down essentially gives Tomlin a free pass from criticism this year, because if the Steelers are bad with a backup quarterback, it's pretty easy to say, hey, our franchise quarterback missed, 14 and a half games. What do you expect? At the same time, if the Steelers do well, then you start talking about Tomlin as even if they're 8-8, 9-7, you may have to put him in the conversation for a potential coach of the year candidate, because you say, hey, they got themselves 2 or over 500 with their backup quarterback playing 14 and a half games. So, it's a double-edged sword that it I don't want to say it absolves him from criticism, but it makes criticism of him have to be much more pointed, and I think has to be much more focused on the defensive side of the ball, because there you really, not only do you not have significant injuries, I mean, I guess Vince Williams is down, but you made a trade of your first round draft pick next year for a guy that everyone in the building says can help you. So there was some mixed reactions about getting Minkah Fitzpatrick. The more I thought about it, the more I liked the move. And we can talk about that more in a minute. What specifically I liked about it, I did see one tweet out there that I laughed heartily at, that giving Keith Butler Minkah Fitzpatrick is like giving Ray Charles a telescope. So I've definitely soured on Butler. I agree that he should be gone. I think the soonest they would probably make the move would be the bye week. I would be surprised if they did it before that, just to give, a couple weeks to make that transition. Like you said, you made a great point, Mark, that they traditionally don't make an in-season coordinator move. They wait till the end of the year. But at the same time, they haven't traded their first-round pick away since the 1960s. So they made a bold move up in the draft to go get Devin Bush. They made a bold move in week 2 to get Minkah Fitzpatrick. So it's kind of a brave new world where our previous assumptions about, what the Steelers' modus operandi isn't necessarily what they're always going to do anymore.
Well, so Ben, let's jump into Rudy here first before we get to the Fitzpatrick deal. As you said, you were there, and you get a different vibe when you're at the game than you do on TV or watching on TV. And, you said he did some nice things, but he certainly has some things he's got to work on, and that's to be expected. What do you think is the best way for him to be successful from here on out, assuming he's the Steelers quarterback for the next 14 games?
I want to touch on something Ian said first, and then I'll answer that. I think Tomlin has less job security as of today than he had before, when he had on Saturday. If there ever was a time to make a change, it's going to be at the end of this season. And, basically, if they decide that Rudolph can be the franchise quarterback and that Mike Tomlin is not the guy because, they made this bold move and they gave him more on defense and he still isn't getting it done, then he's, you're gone. I mean, basically, you don't need Ben anymore if you've decided that Rudolph is going to be the franchise future. And the time to make a switch is then, early in Rudolph's career.
True.
Not later. So I think a lot of what the last couple of years, a lot of what has given Tomlin job security, other than the fact that he coaches for he's the head coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, is that he has an aging quarterback, and that quarterback, you're not going to ask him to learn a new offense.
No, it's not going to happen.
You're just not. So the whole speculation about will he or won't he get an extension this summer, I thought was stupid. You knew he was going to get an extension. Why placate the media with that bullshit and try and make them believe that maybe he won't? It was total nonsense. So, when they gave him the 1 year, I was like, yeah, this is for show. It's BS. He and Ben are both now on the same schedule, but it means nothing. It's complete BS. He's going to have 2 more years. He's going to have 2 years left, and they're going to give him another extension. So this is dumb. I mean, the time to make a switch is when you've got that young quarterback in place and you think you've got enough talent on defense, but they're just not being coached properly. So, I think he's got less. Now, getting back to Rudolph, what can he do? Simply put, what Rudolph can do to be successful for the rest of the year is throw the ball between the numbers, not outside, because that's where he's best at placing the ball. Now, he's an accurate passer. He's not strong-armed. Sorry, he's just not.
Agreed.
Ben has got a cannon. Rudy does not. And the thing they can do to protect him is run play action. But in order to do that, they've really got to get the running game going. And so, again, what I'd like to see is more runs between the tackles, which is going to mean Benny Snell this week because James Conner is not 100%.
Right.
And, maybe some counter plays with Jalen Samuels and rolling Jalen Samuels out of the backfield and, throwing some short passes into the flat. But they've got to get the running game going. They've got to keep the defense honest or Rudolph's going to get killed. They're just going to run blitzes on him all day long, and he's going to get killed.
Yeah, he cannot be sitting back there throwing the ball 40 or 45 times. If that happens, it's forget it. And I think they know that. Ian, is there anything else that you need to see from Rudolph in order for him to be successful this week or going forward?
I think, on a very basic level for a backup quarterback, I thought he did a very good job. I'll say with the basics, he got him in and out of the huddle that didn't have to spend any timeouts on, delayed games where he struggled with play calls or things like that. He was able to, get the team up to the line, make the necessary checks at the line that he needed to get the players in position. He got hurt by a few drops. I mean, obviously the Moncrief one was big, but he had a couple other ones. Xavier Grimble had another ball hit him right in the hands over the middle for like an 8 to 10 yard gain and just dropped it. Yep. So, he's got to get some help from the players around him. He's got to get some help from the coaches as far as schematically, like Ben talked about with play action passes, which is something they haven't done as much under Ben, Roethlisberger, not our Ben that we're talking to, obviously. And just some schematic stuff. Get into favorable down and distance situations. You don't have to get big chunks all the time. Get yourself into 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5, where you can be more aggressive with your play calling and keep the run game active. Stay out of those 3rd and long situations. I actually thought even through the preseason, Rudolph's pocket presence was really good. He does a very good job. Identifying pressure, stepping away from it, and then being able to make throws on the move. He can't throw as well, on a full-out run as Ben can, and I think our Ben made a good reference to that with his arm strength, that it's not as strong as Roethlisberger's, but he's still able to look and find guys open when he's on the move, which is much better than having a statue back there.
Yeah. I agree. I think you guys have both nailed it. I don't need to say anything further. Let me kind of wrap up the discussion with Rudolph as it pertains to just long term here. Ben, what is a record that you would look back and say, I think that's a good mark. I think that he got to 7-9, 8-8, 9-7, something like that. Whatever. And you could say that, what, I'm satisfied with that based on what we're dealing with. I mean, do you have that record in mind at all?
Not really. I mean, my expectations are, a lot lower than they were at the beginning of the season. Certainly now.
Certainly, yeah.
Honestly, it's not all going to be on him.
No,
the defense has still got the same issues they had last year and the year before that. And, I don't know, maybe 8-8, 9-7. I mean, if he can get there, if he can get to 8-8, that means he went 8-6 as a starter. That's pretty damn good. Yeah, I'd be okay with that. I wouldn't be like thrilled with it, obviously, because 8-8 sucks. But it would be more satisfying than, him going 500 and the Steelers finishing 7-9.
Yeah. Yeah. Ian, do you have a ballpark number in mind? What you think is going to be good?
I was actually going to say if we get to 7-9, that would be okay. I mean, it's not great, but getting to 7, I tweeted something this week that got a lot of play on Twitter that basically said, hey, I remember the pre-Roethlisberger years. I remember going 6-10, for the younger fans out there. And I got a lot of responses of people saying, I have never experienced a season without Ben Roethlisberger. I don't know what a losing season is like. Yeah. And then I had people obviously, that said oh yeah, I remember the 80s were painful. Some people saying the pre-70s were painful. I don't remember that, but I was born in the 80s, and my first quarterback I can remember is Bubby Brister, and those were some painful years in the early 90s, and even in the late 90s we were trotting out Kent Graham, and it was some Jim Miller, some bad times. That 6-10 year in 2003 is the one I still go back to. Losing 10 games is awful. It just sucks. Double digit losses are terrible. And I realize that, there's some other teams out there like Cleveland that threw a parade basically because they didn't lose double digit games last year. Even though they didn't have a winning season.
Because they were almost 500. Yeah, throw a parade. Yay.
Perspectives are so different from city to city.
Right. So I think if Rudolph can go 500 and go 7-7, get us to 7-9, even though it's a losing season overall, we won't have lose that mental hurdle of not losing double digit games. It's just, it's something to get past. And then also you have to figure that the more games we win this year, the worse of a first-round pick Miami actually gets from us, which would probably put it, going 7-9 probably puts it somewhere in the, 14, 15 to 20 range. Yeah, somewhere around there. So, and really just watching this Jacksonville, Tennessee game, there aren't a lot of other good teams in the AFC. So outside of, New England, Kansas City, the Chargers, the AFC South sucks. Baltimore looks good right now, but we've seen them start fast plenty of times and fade later. Cincinnati's terrible. Cleveland still hasn't beaten a team with a winning record. So it's and we get to play the full AFC East this year. So we've played New England, but we also get to play Buffalo, the Jets, and Miami. Yep. So it's not out of the question if the defense can come around and be competent that we could get to 8-8 or somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's fair. It's kind of where I'm at too. I think 5 of the next 7 are at home. And going to give him a nice cushion base, if you will, to to get his feet underneath him as the full-time starter. And, stranger things have happened. We've seen what other backups have done over time. I go back to Jeff Hostetler and with the Giants, and granted that was a very different situation, but I can't help but laugh at the point you were making. There is an entire generation of Steeler fans who are perhaps going off into uncharted territory with records that they're not used to seeing, which is below 500. And all three of us can attest that it's not fun. But it is what it is. And obviously we hope that Rudy leads us to the promised land, but we have to be realistic too. You're listening to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by 26shirts.com/Pittsburgh. And right now they have a brand new shirt out celebrating the Penguins. Penguins, I think, are in training camp doing some preseason stuff already. And it's Reservoir Pens. It's kind of a takeoff of the movie poster from Reservoir Dogs. You got to see it. It's a neat shirt, but $8 from everyone that is sold helps benefit the American Cancer Society of Pennsylvania. So please get a great shirt, do something good at the same time. Ben, the Steelers make an unusual, rare in-season trade, and it's for a first-round draft pick, and they get Minkah Fitzpatrick in return.
Yeah.
Oh, what are your thoughts on this trade?
That Fitzpatrick is our 2020 first-round draft pick, and I'm fine with it. The guy's got 3 years left on his contract at a total of $5.8 million for 3 years, plus a fifth-year option for the number 11 pick versus a top 10 pick, which is a much less expensive fifth-year option. So I'm pretty stoked about it, to be perfectly frank. Ian, do you know that I should know this off the top of my head, and I can't remember. I've got a brain fart. What's the difference between top 10? It's like top 24 salaries. No, it's the average between the top 10 and top 25 salaries is the fifth-year option, as opposed to if you're a top 10 pick, it's the top 10 salaries averaged out, and that's got to be your fifth-year option. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, and then it does go down after the top 10 picks for picks 11 through 32.
Correct.
And it's somewhat based on position also. But I don't remember what the average is for the 11 to 32 picks, like how they figure that out. The number does go down significantly, though. I'll say.
Yeah, I just always remember you got the top 10, and then it starts dropping kind of rapidly after that.
Well, Miami had to give Fitzpatrick a $10 million signing bonus last year, and they got to eat all of that dead money. So that's the other thing that people really aren't taking into consideration is the huge chunk of cash and cap space the Steelers saved by burning a first-round pick in next year's draft. It's likely that they're going to get a 3 for Le'Veon Bell, and I certainly hope so because they traded away their 3 next year. So,
the other thing to keep in mind, sorry, jumping in here real quick though, is that the fifth-year option is tied to the player's position. So playing Fitzpatrick at safety also will have a much lower fifth-year option number than if he was playing at cornerback.
Yes.
Because cornerback salaries tend to be much higher than safeties. So I was just looking at like the fifth-year option salaries for this year, which were guys from the 2016 draft class. For picks 11 through 32, the safety fifth-year option was basically $6.5 million, and the cornerback fifth-year option was like $9.9 million. So yeah, so there is a fairly significant difference between a safety and a cornerback salary also.
Huge.
Yeah.
So, just talking with both of you, both on and off the air, it sounds like all three of us are in favor of this, and we've all kind of pointed out the reasons why, whether on the show or in articles this week or just chit-chatting on social media. But, I keep coming back to the fact that this is a known, whereas you just don't know what you're gonna get in the draft, especially when you're talking about the Steelers when it comes to drafting secondary positions lately. I really don't see any reason to not like this deal. Now, we all know that if things go really, really, really bad and we end up at 4-12 and Rudolph hasn't played well, that you're going to get people complaining that, oh, geez, we could have used that pick to draft, the quarterback of the future, blah, blah, blah. You can't live necessarily in the future. You got to live for what's going on right now. And all three of us know they have extreme confidence in Rudolph, probably more so than most teams have in their backup quarterback. So I like the move. I think it's great. I told Ian before we started, I have a little trepidation just because of some of the attitude stuff that he apparently had about where to play. But again, I think a lot of players would have been in a similar situation in that organization, which is a complete catastrophe right now. Was talking to somebody today that's down there, and you can't even describe how down the fan base is down there. It's just awful what's going on in Miami. But I'm excited. I think this guy brings an immediate presence there, and maybe even starts to turn the ball over a little bit more than what we've seen. I mean, any bit would be more. So I'm very excited about it, Ben.
One quick point. There have been a few Pittsburgh sports radio personalities who have voiced some concerns that Fitzpatrick wanted out of Miami after 17 months, and that if he plays at a high level, he certainly won't be happy with his contract. Yeah, it's either that or he suddenly realized that he was part of an organization that was hyper-focused on tanking the season to get the number 1 overall pick in the next draft, and was simultaneously trading or cutting its top talent away in an effort to do so. And he decided that rather than be part of that loser, he'd like to be a part of that exodus and get the hell out.
Yeah.
And I look at it from that standpoint. You got a guy who likes football, who wants to win, wants to be part of a team that wants to win, and suddenly finds himself on a team that's losing on purpose and says, the hell with this. I don't want to be part of this.
I don't blame him. I think
I don't blame him either. I really don't. I don't think this makes him a bad guy. I think that's a talking point made by somebody who's looking for a talking point, and he's trying to stir the pot, and that's fine. Quick point on fifth-year salaries, since we were discussing it before. It's calculated based upon the position you took the highest number of snaps at the year previous. And fifth-year salaries are determined by draft position. First 10 picks earn pay equal to the average of the 10 highest salaries at that position. The remainder of the first round is the average of the 3rd through 25th highest salaries at that position. Okay, so it sounds to me like it's average salaries. It's not cap hits. And I thought before there was cap hits, but it's average salaries, APY, average per year.
But I don't think any of us are under any illusion that he's going to, see any time anywhere other than mostly safety, right? I mean, I don't see him playing corner. Maybe slot corner occasionally.
Yeah, I don't know. And I tend to wonder if he isn't going to play some slot corner like this week, to be perfectly frank, if he isn't going to be covering George Kittle.
It'd be nice if somebody covers George Kittle.
Wouldn't it?
And let's talk about that because last week the Steelers got burned by some guy with the last name of Disley. I mean, my God, it's like you could pull a guy off the street who is currently like, a UPS delivery guy and say, hey, you have nice size. You can catch the ball. We're playing the Steelers this weekend. We just need you to run a seam route and go catch touchdown passes, man. You'll be famous. And now we got this coming up as we kind of segue into this game this week against 2-0 San Francisco, opening the season at home for their first home game after 2 road wins. And they got one of the best tight ends in the league. And gee, what do we don't do well? Cover tight ends. So Ian, let's start right there. Let's start with that San Francisco offense. We know what the Steelers defense needs to work on, but what are the things we need to focus on with the Niners?
So a lot of their offense starts with their running game. They actually have a pretty good running game, despite the fact that they've had some injuries to running backs that they've signed. They signed Jerick McKinnon to a big deal last year, and then he tore his ACL and hasn't played since. And they signed Tevin Coleman this year, and he got hurt. But Matt Brady has been really good for them, and they run a lot of play action stuff off the running game.
Right.
The other thing to keep an eye on is that Jimmy Garoppolo gets the ball out quick and does not get hit very much. I saw a chart today based on the NFL Next Gen stats that they now publish. He's only getting hit on like 5% of his dropbacks, and it's getting the ball out in like basically 2.5 seconds, which is right around where like Brady and Mahomes get the ball out. So he gets the ball out very quickly. Quicker than guys like Wentz, Dalton, Trubisky, Stafford, Roethlisberger. So the ball's coming out fast, and he doesn't get hit very much, which speaks to both their offensive line and just the fact that they have a short passing game, they have a quick passing game, and they run scheme things like play action bootlegs where there really shouldn't be anyone around him, and he's got some time to look down the field and make throws. So that's the first thing to keep an eye on is, Seattle made an in-game adjustment that after the first few drives, they shortened up their passes, and Wilson started getting the ball out a lot faster. And that basically neutralized what was a pretty good Steelers pass rush at the beginning of the game. That they were getting the ball out so fast that even the interior pressure didn't have time to get there because Wilson was taking the snap in the shotgun, and it was, I think I saw his average was like 1.86 seconds to get the ball out last week, which was insane to be under 2 seconds. Yeah. So nobody, Aaron Donald's not getting there in 1.86 seconds. Like, it's just not happening if you're in the shotgun. So, San Francisco does some schematic things very well. Like you said, George Kittle's a guy to watch. They have some very, very speedy receivers on the outside too. Some guys that are capable of making guys miss in space. And one of the things Seattle did against us last week was not only were they throwing quick, but they were forcing our defensive backs to make tackles in space, which unfortunately, pre-Minkah Fitzpatrick at least is not really our forte. So yeah, at least from an offensive standpoint, that's what I'm looking at for San Francisco.
Well, so Ben, how do you combat that? If you've got a quarterback that's getting rid of the ball, it's a 1-2-3 throw, and your pass rush isn't getting there. How do you combat that against a guy like Garoppolo?
Play bump. It's not friggin' rocket science. You incorporate bump into your coverages, and you play press when you're not playing bump, so they think that maybe you're going to play bump, and you play physical, and then you mix in some zone on top of that, and you disguise it. But you've got to make him think. If he knows pre-snap where he's going to go with the ball, he's going to chew you up. So you've got to divert and change receivers' pass patterns at the lines. Make them think that they're going to have outside leverage, and then take it away from them. Just abuse them in the first 5 yards. You gotta. There's no way around that. And with a guy like George Kittle, who's not only fast but also big, that's going to be really difficult. For example, I don't really know exactly how you do that. I mean, Bud Dupree can't pass rush anyway. Maybe you just have him just smack him, when he comes off the line, and then you let a safety take over after the fact. But they've got to redirect those routes. Yeah. They have to do that.
And it's something they didn't do last week when Seattle made the adjustment.
And they didn't do it against New England either. And the thing that sucks is they had success doing exactly what I just described against New England last year. And they abandoned it.
Yeah. Now, Ben, you mentioned –
other thing –
yeah, go ahead.
The other thing I'd watch for, too, that we've especially struggled with this year, and it's something that's bleeding over from last year, again, to get back to, Keith Butler and the definition of insanity, is New England did this and Seattle did this. They would split either a running back or a tight end out wide and move their number one receiver into the slot, and the Steelers didn't adjust their defense. They
Yes.
kept their cornerbacks on the outside, the farthest outside guy, whether it was a tight end or a running back or whoever.
Ridiculous.
And
they had Nelson on Metcalf, and he was having a great game, and so they moved him inside. And not only did Mike Hilton not cover him well, once he didn't cover him at all. And Cam Kelly's 20 yards off the ball, passes him along. Hilton, that had to be a miscommunication. Again. 20 yards off the ball, Hilton blitzes, and Kelly's like, "Oh, I'm supposed to cover him? I didn't. Touchdown."
God. Well, you mentioned Bud Dupree. Now, Joe Staley is a very fine offensive tackle for the San Francisco 49ers, and I believe he went on IR today. The Niners are going to put a rookie up against Bud Dupree. So, Ben, your expectations of Bud Dupree, 3, 4, 5 sacks on Sunday?
Bud Dupree was limited in practice today with an ankle, so my expectations are low.
How many snaps has Ian? You might know this. Has Ola Adeniyi had so far in 2 games?
Not many, although he was working his way back from an injury. I think he played 1 in the opener. I don't know if he played any at all against Seattle. I can find that out quickly here, though.
I think it's 1. I think it's 1 defensive snap.
No, he's played more than that.
He has?
Yeah, he has.
I thought it was just 1. I thought maybe I saw a different stat today. So, we've already kind of talked a little bit about the Steelers offensively, about what we expect Rudolph and stuff to do. But San Francisco's defense is playing very well. They had 2 pick sixes against Tampa Bay, which, Jameis Winston, it's not totally unheard of. But then they played pretty well against Andy Dalton and the Bengals. And, and the Bengals looked fairly competent the week before against Seattle. So, I don't know, Ian, what do you expect to see out of the San Francisco defense?
They have an aggressive secondary. I mean, Richard Sherman's still, a solid corner that can play press and be physical with receivers and
hold. Gets away with a lot of holding.
A lot, yes.
Yeah, he does.
But they're probably going to match him up against Juju and make Juju work to get open. And Ola has 4 total snaps this year, by the way.
Yeah,
4 on defense. Just found that.
Okay, 1 4. I was close.
Yeah, not many. It was the correct answer. But back to Seattle's defense, or not Seattle, sorry, San Francisco's defense.
Yeah.
They have a very good defensive front. They've spent a lot of high draft picks on defensive linemen. Some very similar defensive linemen actually. With the kids from Oregon, the kid from Stanford,
Bosa.
Bosa's more of a defensive end, but I was thinking more of sort of the interior combo linemen.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Solomon Thomas, blanking on the third guy, DeForest Buckner. Yeah. So between Buckner, Eric Armstead, and Solomon Thomas, I mean, they're basically 3 clones of each other, and they can rotate those guys between end positions and tackle positions, kind of like the Giants did when they beat the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl, when they took their outside linemen, moved them to inside rushers on passing downs, and the Patriots interior linemen had trouble with that speed coming up the middle. And San Francisco has D Ford too, that they signed from Kansas City, who we all know maybe or maybe not jumped off sides, maybe
lined up off sides.
Yeah.
Lined up in the neutral zone.
Yeah. San Francisco also has Quan Alexander at linebacker. He was a guy that was really good in Tampa Bay, and a lot of us thought the Steelers should go after this year. The Steelers wound up signing Mark Barron and then drafting Devin Bush, but Quan Alexander's a Pro Bowl caliber talent there.
Yes, he is.
And or I should say Pro Bowl talent, period. I mean, he's been to Pro Bowl before. So San Francisco's a good defense. They're going to challenge us, and really the Steelers haven't yet shown the ability to have a second target in the passing game that's consistent outside of Juju. I mean, Juju's definitely the number one. It was good to see Rudolph looking his way and having that connection. I don't know how much they played together in the preseason, considering Rudolph played with the twos a lot more.
Right.
I'm expecting James Washington to get more balls thrown his way. And honestly, at this point, considering how bad Dante Moncrief has been and Johnny Holton really hasn't given us much, I mean, the Steelers offensively should just roll out there in 11 personnel with either Connor or Samuels in the backfield, Vance at tight end. You put Juju on one side, you put Washington on the other, and have Deontay Johnson on the field, either in the slot or rotating around on the outside, and move someone else, Juju maybe inside if you need to get a matchup, and just roll with it and see what happens. Let the young guys play. You're already with a backup quarterback. Moncrief sucks. Don't get fancy. Just put your best players out there and see what happens. Get the ball in their hands. Let them make plays.
As much experience as James Washington and Rudy have together, I think that's going to be a pretty good match this week. Now, that said, I'm not saying, they're going to take a game over or anything, but
no,
it's got to be better than what Dante Moncrief has brought to the table so far. He's been flat awful. And on top of that, has gifted the opposition with turnovers. And it's just been so flippin' disappointing. And the running game, they got to get the running game going. They have to get the running game going. I mean, last year, that was something that, that kind of drove the engine there for a while,
Definitely.
And they got to get it going again. And if they don't, we're going to have significant problems. But those play bump this week, mix the coverages, and get the running game going. If they do that, they give themselves a chance. If they don't, it's another loss on the West Coast.
Hey, speaking of that,
go for it, Ian. I know you wanted to get that in here in the last
yeah, this is my brand. The Steelers under Mike Tomlin since 2007 have been the second best team in the league in the Eastern time zone. They have basically a 700 winning percentage. They're winning basically 70% of their games in the Eastern time zone. That's both home and away. Home, they have a 714 winning percentage, which is the fourth best home percentage in the league, behind New England, Green Bay, and Baltimore. And actually, on the road in the Eastern time zone, the Steelers have the best winning percentage in the league, even better than New England's. But when they have to adjust their watches and go outside the Eastern time zone under Mike Tomlin, it's been flat out awful. Overall, they're basically under 35%. It's like 34% and change. 12-23 since 2007 outside the Eastern time zone. And it's not like the teams that they've lost to have all been Peyton Manning Denver teams. You throw in a Terrell Pryor-led Oakland team. You throw in another Denver team led by a different quarterback who I won't name. You throw in a Chicago team led by Kyle Orton, who had thrown, I think, 4 interceptions the week prior. They're just some bad teams that they've lost to. And the Steelers traditionally haven't been great outside the Eastern time zone. Cowher was, won about 43% of his games. Noel won about 48% outside the Eastern time zone. But those numbers weren't starkly different than their regular overall road record, I'll say. Whereas Tomlin on the road in the Eastern time zone still wins 67% of his games, but outside the Eastern time zone, it's half that. It's 33%. So it's just a weird quirk of statistics, but it's maintained true over time.
It has.
And it's weird. It's bizarre. And I just, I don't know. I don't know why it is. I think some of it may have to do with the travel schedules that the team has. Some of it may have to do with, playing in Denver's a difficult place to play. Playing in, Arizona, they've actually won a game in under Tomlin. But, playing in Oakland, not only is it hard, but that field is just crap there. And, I remember games in Oakland where they had to change their cleats at halftime because they just got no traction at all the first half because of how bad the field was. So San Francisco, when they were at Candlestick, had bad fields.
And we're running late here, Ian. I'm going to cut you off, but
Sure.
it's been a problem under Tomlin for years, and again, Cowher's record wasn't great either. But it's interesting. They're going to go with we're on the East Coast time schedule. That's their plan as they fly out Saturday. But anyway, again, thanks to 26shirts.com for sponsoring the show. Always appreciate it. Make sure you get over there and check them out. And for Ian and for Ben and for myself, that is it for this episode. And we'll see you after the game next week. And hey, go Steelers.